Welcome back to the Power and Market Podcast. I'm Ryan McMakin, executive editor at the Mises Institute. And joining me today are two of our contributing editors here at the Institute. We've got Tho Bishop and we've got Connor O'Keefe. And if you're a regular reader here, you'll be familiar with works from both of these guys on our front page. If you've never visited, make sure you go to Mises.org. That's MISES.org for other podcasts, for lots of written content, for daily updates. And so this is our current event podcast. We talk a little more informally about whatever's going on during the week, but with, of course, attention to most of our core issues. And one of our core issues, of course, is the central bank, the Federal Reserve here in the United States. And there's actually been a lot of drama, right? Normally, right, what sort of drama is there around central banking? Well, with Trump in office, it's fun. There's a lot going on. And so what's been going on this week is Trump threatening to fire Jerome Powell. Now, he's been saying that he wants to fire Jerome Powell for a while, and reporters ask Powell every now and then in his FOMC press conferences, well, would you step down if Trump tells you to leave? And Powell gets all serious and says no. So there's been some drama brewing up there for a while, but he renewed his call for firing Powell and acted like it was imminent, that he was going to do it any minute. And of course, by the way, we should note that legally, this isn't something that is probable to be respected by the courts. It's the executive branch is supposed to have basically no direct power over the central bank. We can talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but some of the drama is the fact that Trump says he wants to get rid of Powell. And then he's bringing out this issue around this super expensive renovation of the Fed's headquarters in Washington, D.C. to make the case for it. And then there's all just the usual stuff that Powell isn't lowering interest rates enough or fast enough, and it's all that sort of stuff. So we're gonna talk about that a little bit today. And then there's some other issues related to just the larger economy. And really how the press is going to, it looks like the press is going to try and frame whatever bad news we get from the economy as the fault of tariffs. And we'll explain why that's a problem too. And so we'll just get all the usual fun stuff about things Trump says and how insane those things are. That seems to be increasing in frequency. I don't know. That's has that changed? I don't think so. Maybe I'm just noticing more because it touches more on the subject matter that interests me. But let's get right to it. So Trump says he wants to get rid of Powell. Okay, fine. One thing that people point out, by the way, this is just a side note, and I think maybe I should look into it more. There's kind of building evidence on this fact that a lot of this crazy stuff that Trump says about things he's going to do end up looking like they could be market manipulations, right? Because Trump comes out and he says, oh, I'm going to fire Powell. And then certain stocks and the market tanks. And then he changes his mind and says, oh, I was just kidding. I'm not going to fire Powell. And then the market reverses himself. If you know ahead of time that Trump's going to say these things, you can make a boatload of money. Trump is making it possible, if you're his friend, to time the market. I don't have a whole lot of specifics I'm going to bring up today. I'm just saying that's something to look out for in the future, is that there seems to be many cases where Trump is saying things that he knows will tank various stocks or tank the economy or tank the stock market. And then he reverses himself shortly thereafter and things rebound. And if you know he's going to say those things, then you're basically functioning on insider information. So that's a sign of like real serious corruption if Trump is doing that sort of stuff on purpose. I don't know, but that is something that people are starting to point out, and maybe something to be alarmed by. But maybe in the future, someone will do a more systematic analysis of that, and we can look into that. But so let's talk about this. I think maybe the most fun, gossipy thing about it is this whole, hey, Powell wants to renovate, or he is. There's a huge renovation going on at the Fed's headquarters in Washington, and it's costing $2.5 billion. That seems expensive to me. Does that seem expensive to you, though?
Oh, well, it's just $2.5 billion. Yeah, building with a B, though. A lot of marble involved. We'll say, I wish I'd got the early tip about Trump tweeting about Coca-Cola moving to cane sugar. Because like that Coca-Cola was doing some numbers today. Though that itself is kind of weird, because actually like that would increase the cost, which neither here nor there. Trying to figure that out is a whole other conversation. So right. But going back to the renovations there, yes, this came up on some of the Sunday news shows, ABC. I learned about it all afterwards because I do not watch those, particularly these days. But yes, there is a growing chorus of Republicans that find this a very, very safe measure here. Of course, Trump loves buildings, so this speaks right to his. If Trump was in charge of the Fed renovation, for one, probably good for gold.
Gold leaf everywhere.
And yeah,
it would look like a Russian palace. Yes.
But I did on those lines. I did appreciate, even though again it shouldn't take anything that a senator says, particularly Tim Scott. But I do appreciate him saying, "Oh, this seems kind of like renovations you'd expect from Versailles." It's like I'll take it. I mean, it's shallow fluff, but I like that sort of I like those sort of imagery when it comes to our great economic Politburo. But yes, a lot of get $2.5 billion for what it seems to be using a lot of the marble they already have. A little corrects here and there. That I guess there was a lot more asbestos than they expected, which, there's got to be a way of figuring out how that's to blame on some of the Fed policies that we've had of late. I did appreciate, though, that the Fed, as one of the points that has driven up this bill so high, is the Fed complaining about the cost of inflation as part of their renovations. So yes, this is again not the most meaty necessarily critique of the Fed, but I always love when that building in particular, the Eccles building, is getting some arrows thrown its way.
Well, and some of the narrative around it was even claiming that Powell was straight up lied to Congress, because he was saying there's no special elevators, there's no new marble, and then some people dived into the specifics of the construction, was able to find that turns out there is some significant upgrades to elevators and marble and that sort of thing. So they're saying, does Powell not know? Was he just straight up lying to the faces of Congress and stuff? These are sorts of things that are great for just, I don't know, how would we call it? Gossip? I don't know, trash talking on Capitol Hill, right? And I think good that the Fed is being roped into it, right? Because the Fed, they're losing so much money in that, right? If you look at some of the other podcasts I've done with Alex Pollock, for example, and some of his other columns on Mises.org, the Fed is just bleeding money because they've turned themselves into a huge savings and loan. So they're collecting super low interest on long dated stuff, and then they're having to pay out daily interest into their bank reserves. So they're bleeding like hundreds of millions of dollars. And they are contributing nothing to the Treasury like they were for a long time. They're actually sucking money out. And then at the same time, they're looking at this $2.5 billion renovation, which is shocking. It's apparently the most expensive renovation in Washington, D.C. history. And we're blaming that all on some asbestos. It seems like it would be better to just level the building and rebuild something. They should just rebuild it with a cheap, modern office building. I mean, that's all these technocrats are. And that just kind of gets a pet peeve. I don't know, maybe the pet peeve I have is just about this obsession with these old government buildings having to look beautiful. I mean, they don't need any marble at all. They need zero marble. It should be like a cheap office building is what these people should be working in, and spare me the garbage about how, it's the people's building. And we show our American cultural whatever by having beautiful buildings covered in marble. Okay, first of all, normal people aren't allowed in the building, except maybe on some controlled tour. It's by no way the people's building. Most people will never get to see it or experience it or use it in any meaningful way. They're just exploited by the people who work there. So why is it an expensive building? Why is there anything special about it? Bulldoze it and replace it with something cheap. By the way, something next to the freeway that's easy to get in and out of. Lots of parking, maybe a parking structure right next door. Why does this stuff all have to be it's all built for the convenience of the power broker so they can easily get to Capitol Hill and lobby the government to screw you over more. I remember I used to go on a little rant about this, about the state capitol in Colorado, where I worked for a number of years as a lobbyist. And the building, of course, is very beautiful. It's very hard to access, however. If you're just a normal person and you want to go to the state capitol and talk to your state legislators, which you can still do, you can still actually get a meeting with a state legislator pretty easy. It's nothing like Congress where you have to write $1 million check to get access to your legislator. You can just wait outside their office and talk to them. However, parking is terrible. Finding the building is terrible. Navigating the one-way streets is terrible and everything. The Capitol should absolutely 100% be moved to an office park right off an interstate freeway that normal people can get in and out of very, very easily. The reason that nobody wants that to happen is because the people who work there, the lobbyists and legislators, it makes them feel important. It makes them feel exclusive to be in this very old building covered in marble that's hard for the normies and the plebs to get in and out of. And so I'm 100% in taking those people down a notch by making them work in the normal sort of office building that Joe Schmo has to work in, and turn it into condos, turn it into something that actually makes some real revenue. And that's what should be done with the Fed building if it's not just bulldozed. But of course, they're not going to do that. They're going to talk about, historic preservation, all this garbage. Government buildings shouldn't even be eligible for historic preservation. They're the works of parasites. If you want them to be preserved, then hand them over to the private sector and see what happens there. I'm tired of expending billions of dollars because you built some crappy building back in the 1930s that's now filled with asbestos. But that's what we're dealing with this building in the Fed. And you know that those do-nothing technocrats who work there, they just relish walking past those marble walls every day. It makes them feel very important. So the whole thing is just an illustration of how terrible and awful the whole central banking class is. And so I like you, though, I like that they're being compared to the scum that created Versailles, which, if you know about Versailles was created specifically by the king to centralize the government. He used it as a way to get all of the important nobles to live near him. It's like a panopticon. He wanted to get the nobles and the important people in government living near him so he could observe them and influence them and lobby them and centralize his own power and basically control the nobles more fully. That was the purpose of Versailles, specifically to destroy local autonomy. So yeah, that's perfect. A perfect analogy for what the Fed building is. But unfortunately, while Trump's talking about it right now in terms of using that to get rid of Powell, everybody's going to forget about it 10 minutes from now. So as soon as people are going to finish listening to this podcast, and then 10 minutes later, they're going to forget about the issue altogether, as will the general public. So unfortunately, that'll go nowhere, although I would love to see it become a cause célèbre for years to come.
Well, I would add to on top of making themselves feel important, I think the optics, at least for me, the optics are kind of like the big factor in this entire kind of Trump-Fed dynamic. And I think this building renovation is a really good microcosm. It's almost like poetic. I mean, from my understanding of it, I haven't reviewed the history in a while, is that the Fed used to be based in the Treasury Department. And it was in the 30s. This building was built, I think, in large part as an optics thing. They wanted to present themselves as this independent thing that's sort of separate from the Treasury, separate from the government. And we've done a lot of work here at the Mises Institute showing that that's not true, but they're trying to project that imagery. And I think that it's just kind of interesting watching my read on the situation with Trump and like their whole issue with Trump going after Powell and Trump going after the Fed. It's not that they are like the people that are running the Fed right now and sort of that establishment class. It's not that they're like upset about the idea of interest rates being cut or, money being printed. The whole risk from their perspective is that Trump is going to come in and he's going to really tear down the illusion that the Fed is independent. And so I think there's something kind of poetic about them trying to, spend all this money renovating this building. To your point, yeah, it's making them feel important, but it also makes them look important and separate. It's on the National Mall, so yeah, it's kind of part of the government, but it's a separate thing. It's outside of, where the rest of kind of the economic apparatus of the government is housed. So I think it's interesting how, like, in some ways, this is just the same issue with Trump trying to fire Powell and put somebody loyal to him in. It's all kind of optics at the end of the day.
And to that point, again, like that's why like criticizing Jay Powell is the safest position any Republican can take right now, because for one, I know we're going to talk about some other aspects in terms of how tariffs are going to be blamed for everything. But right now, when it comes to economic point of views, you can kind of attach all baggage that you want on the scapegoat character. We can get Rene Girard to talk about this, but he's kind of put all the baggage on Powell, and then get rid of him, and then next step, profit, and so you don't have to have any sort of sense on like what should the Fed really be doing? Like, it's everything's just Powell's the problem. I did appreciate in particular the comment that Trump made earlier about like how he was surprised that he was appointed at all. Now, to be fair, I think if you look at in further context that he was talking about the reappointment by Biden, which I myself am also surprised I lost some money on Predicted because I thought the inflation numbers were going to lead to Powell's exit there. I did not profit off of that opportunity. But I myself, though, someone also surprised that Powell was ever appointed. I do want to point to a 2018 article I wrote about how the swamp wins again. I think it aged pretty well. And the whole idea was that, again, people forget that before he was a Trump appointee, Powell himself was an Obama not appointed Fed governor. I don't want to try to pretend that Powell was some sort of, hope and change ideologue by any means, but it did just go to the fact that there was an appointment of a status quo Federal Reserve chairman. I know there's been some attempts to kind of change that record, and a sympathetic portrayal would suggest that maybe at one point Powell was trying to sell off a little bit of the balance sheet, that there was a little bit of reconsideration from the Yellen days, but all that went back out the window pretty quickly as soon as there was turbulence and all that sort of stuff. Both Trump 1.0, where eventually after enough tweets, Powell did start lowering interest rates when Wall Street was causing a little bit of a temper tantrum back in the day, obviously with COVID in meltdown mode. So again, we even though some people tried to portray Powell as something more interesting than your status quo figure in that position, he has essentially been that. And surprise, surprise, a status quo figure is not someone who is going to be particularly keen on doing whatever Trump is yelling about in today's day and age. One thing that I did think was interesting, though, that came up, which might be a positive step if followed through, which, again, we should not expect follow through, but part of this bigger brouhaha over the weekend with the building criticism and all that was Kevin Warsh, who was someone considered for the Fed last time around, was considered for the Treasury. He did talk about how he made a statement that in this NPR piece, that we need regime change at the Fed, going further that it's not just about the chairman, it's about the whole range of people. It's about changing the mindset and their models, and frankly, it's about breaking some heads. Again, I'm not expecting follow through on this, but the fact that you have some of these figures that are by no means, our folks, let's put it that way, talking a little bit more holistically about the broader makeup and particularly the intellectual capture of what this entity is. If there's anything that leads something closer to that broader reevaluation, even though there is no redemption of the institution itself, the extent to which that is being, has any chance of catching on as something more systemic than just Powell the scapegoat, then that's something that could perhaps have something resembling, if not a silver lining, I don't want to say a copper lining because the cost of that is going up with new tariffs, but something that might resemble getting a little bit closer than truth, and a little bit bigger scale than simply the $2.5 billion with a B renovation of the Eccles building itself.
Well, I think Trump's trying to just create a narrative around the idea that if the economy goes bad, it's Powell's fault.
That guy.
Right. That seems to be his only hope because, of course, there's a lot of data showing that the economy is significantly softening. And one side is going to blame it on tariffs. Trump's going to try and blame it on Powell for being too late. Too little. He's not lowering interest rates enough. And as we talked last time, right, Bill Pulte over at Federal Housing Finance Agency, my favorite guy, Bill Pulte, who he just seems to think that if the Fed just intervenes and starts forcing down interest rates, that the economy is just going to be amazing, that everything's just going to be great. This will solve everyone's problems. And whether they or not they actually believe that, I have no idea. But that seems to be the narrative they're trying to create is, oh, you see this negative economic news. It's all because Powell didn't lower interest rates soon enough. So blame him. I'll appoint this new person and that'll be great. Well, go ahead, though.
I appreciate that our entire political class comes down to the question of, does this person really believe this dumb thing?
Right.
Or is he or is he just saying this dumb thing knowing it's dumb because it's an easy tweet? And again, there's nothing new to the table. I don't want to try to pretend this, but I love that that's where the American Republic is in right now.
Well, I'm glad people are waking up to that, right? As you note, right? It's always been true that it's there's always been performative statements about all of these things, but now the stuff they're saying is so obviously dumb that you have to ask yourself, do they really believe this? And a lot of the time I have no idea, because it's not like these people read books or something. Does anyone think that Trump has ever read a book on central banking or anything like that? I think there's almost guaranteed no on that, and just has no idea. But he did hear somewhere, like at lunch or something, that lowering interest rates makes the economy better. So now he's fixated on that, and that's what he's saying. But the key thing to remember here is that, right, we have nothing good to say about Powell in the sense of, right, is he in favor of hard money or freedom or anything like that? But from Trump's perspective, from the perspective of a mainstream Washington thinker, which is what Trump is at this point, the only reason to get rid of Powell is that he's not enough of an inflationist. That's it. That's why they want to get rid of him. He's not inflating the money supply enough, because they want to get back to asset price inflation that will fuel their buddies in Wall Street with the stock market. That's it. So they want more inflation. That's the whole thing about why we need to get rid of Powell, so they say. And it doesn't strike me as any more sophisticated than that. So that tells you everything you need to know about the people who want to get rid of Powell.
Yeah,
well, the thing is too.
Stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, even in Trump's case, like what's interesting, and it's really not that interesting, but it's worth noting, let me put it that way, is that, like, I remember back in 2016, he was talking pretty eloquently that how, look, he's a real estate guy. Low interest rates are good for me, which, again, obviously he's got plenty of practical experience with this. Like, he understands that. But like, if you're doing the right thing, if you're saving, if you're listening to Dave Ramsey's financial advice, low interest rates are bad for you, right? And so he articulated that. And then what he knows is that when you are in power and you're going to get the blood, you don't want the bubble to pop. And so, like, and he's not wrong. Like, to a certain extent, he's not wrong to have that belief, right? Like, if your focus is on aura farming and trying to project, this grandiose presidency, which, hey, I'm not going to fault the guy for wanting to do that. Like, I mean, just human nature in many extents. Then you're going to want low interest rates, and he knows that instinctually. And of course, he's gonna, so everything else, he does actually. Whether or not he's ever read, I have a feeling he's never read What Has Government Done to Our Money, which I hope our listeners have. But he does get that low interest rates are bad for those trying to save, but it is good for a certain class of people, one of which he was and currently still is.
Yeah, well, that'd be so bad.
There's different categories there.
Like if he's trying to actually create this lasting move, like people are talking about Vance coming in behind him. Like, yeah, like it could be good for the MAGA movement if they go in, flood the economy with easy money. Things would appear good, but that's like a very high time preference, short term thinking kind of thing. One of my favorite articles that we published this year was yours, Ryan, just pointing out the fact that it was sort of in April, in the depth of all this tariff talk, and they had that line that it was all about putting Main Street over Wall Street. And you just pointed out that Trump's preferred monetary policy is just the exact opposite of that. It's just handouts to Wall Street, more of the status quo, more all this stuff that they kind of rage about with the status quo economy, and talking about how the American workers have been screwed over. Like, they're right about all that, but it's because of the stuff that Trump wants to accelerate when it comes to monetary policy. And I thought in that specific piece, you put that out put that together in a good package.
Well, I think so much of also what we're experiencing from Trump, I think a lot of it, as you suggest, though, can be explained by his history as a real estate developer, right? He knows how interest rates work insofar as, does it make my numbers work better on this loan for this condo building or whatever? He gets that. And right, and we see that all over the place, right? Of course, you're going to hear all these people coming out of the woodwork from the National Association of Realtors and the home builders. Well, Pulte's born into a home building family. And Trump, of course, they're going to talk about, hey, we need low interest rates. Why? Because I remember in my professional sort of quasi-private sector life, low interest rates make it easier to make the numbers work on my huge buildings. Also, just the way Trump talks is so the way a real estate developer talks, right? Everything's beautiful. Everything's the best thing ever. I remember once at a presentation by a guy who had created a condo building in Denver. It's just god awful building. I mean, hideous. And he kept referring
So you want him designing the Fed building.
right. Yes. Well, if it's cheap and
Okay.
I don't want a hideous, expensive building. And obviously, private sector buildings should be beautiful. Public sector buildings should be cheap and ugly, just to remind people in government how much we value them. Here, go work at this hideous blank wall building every day. That would be good for you. But yeah, back to the issue. I just remember listening to this condo developer talking about how beautiful his building was. And I looked at the building. I'm like, he was literally using the word beautiful over and over again. Like you almost never hear people use the word beautiful like in daily life, but they use all this flowery BS language to explain their hideous buildings and stuff. And that's the way Trump is. So yeah, I think a lot is explained by his background in that field. So yeah, he gets kind of the very narrow idea of how interest rates work. And so he gets it. But clearly the larger long-term repercussions, he doesn't get at all. And in fact, right, we're talking about, well, if we flood the economy with easy money, then that would create a new bubble and the economy may be good until we can get Vance in office. But at this point, I think we've actually passed that point where lowering interest rates is going to produce the good effect that you think it will. Something that people have been pointing out recently is that when the Fed came in and they cut interest rates in September, the 30-rate mortgage rate actually went up, because people are starting to associate easy money and lower interest rates now with higher inflation and with a weaker economy going forward. So bond investors are starting to call BS, and Fed intervention to lower interest rate might actually have the opposite effect. Higher interest rates, more debt service payments from the federal government, bad stuff that you don't want to happen.
And this goes back to the point we're making right after the election, is that like Trump is not inheriting the same world that he had inherited in 2017, right? Low interest rates would have made number go up, right? It's a very different situation that you have right now for a variety of reasons. And like, and that is the difficulty here. Like there is no easy button. And the easy button's a bad button, right? I'm not suggesting to push the easy button, but like even the easy button does not work anymore.
Yes.
Maybe it has asbestos. I don't know, but like it is not working anymore.
It feels like they're not worried enough about inflation to me too. I guess I was just struck by how damaging that was for Biden when he was in office. And they just seem to be, and I guess this is sort of related to the tariff stuff that we're going to talk about later, which is different than inflation. We'll get into that. But they just don't really seem that worried about the potential for prices to be going up. And it's just like, that was very clear, at least to me, only a couple of years ago, how politically damaging that was. I'm just a bit surprised by that, I guess.
Well, I think as long as they can point to a number that's maybe under 6%, they can just claim that's not a big deal. It's not bad
or
inflation.
Or a scapegoat, like you were saying. So if that's somehow Powell's fault.
Well, let's get into that. Let's get into kind of the narrative inflation and what's going to get blamed for that. So new data was released earlier this week on price inflation, not monetary inflation, on price inflation. We're talking CPI here. And
I know you've gotten a lot of emails clarifying that point. It's very close to home with our.
Let's talk about that 1 second. Let me complain about that. Okay, guys, we have adjectives for a reason. Adjectives modify the noun. Okay, so there's this thing called inflation, but you can modify the word and its meaning by adding adjectives in front of it. So we have a thing called monetary inflation, and that is when the money supply increases. And usually, if you will find on Mises.org, if you see the term inflation, it is a reference to monetary inflation, because we're Misesians and we use the Misesian definition of the plain word inflation. Inflation all by itself means monetary inflation. Very good. However, if you add an adjective to the front of it that says price inflation, we're talking about inflating prices. If you're going to argue with me and say that the word inflation could never be used unless used in the strict Misesian sense, then I guess we can never use the word to explain grade inflation or credential inflation or inflation of any kind that doesn't refer to monetary inflation. So you could just stop sending me the emails saying that don't ever use the phrase price inflation because inflation only means monetary. Yes, we get it. That's why we use adjectives to change the meaning of the word.
And ladies and gentlemen, our dear listeners, this is a peek behind the mask of some of the emails that we get from people we love with love. But just a little behind the scenes.
The truth is, I don't actually get emails from like core supporters or anything. These are people complaining like on Twitter, right? So, I mean, it's not like it matters very much. I mean, occasionally I will get emails from people, but I legitimately and politely ask them to provide me with a usable phrase that can replace inflation in that case. And nothing is ever suggested except like replace the word. Like they literally want me everywhere in an article where you use the word in price inflation. They want me to replace it with rising prices caused by an increase in the money supply.
Mouthful.
You can't do that. You can't just insert that phrase everywhere where you're referring to.
It's not a beautiful phrase.
To rising prices. Yeah. So, I mean, we are constrained just simply by the usage of the English language. Anyway, back to the issue of regular inflation. So, yeah, so the price inflation numbers went up this past month. We saw this. This was in June's numbers, and we saw this in both core CPI, regular CPI. The numbers accelerated both month to month and year over year. So the numbers are actually moving back above 2.2%, the arbitrary 2% goal that the Fed invented in the 1990s and then actually really instituted in the 2000s. Even though the statute, by the way, says that the target should be 0% inflation if you look at the actual acts coming out of Congress in reference to the Fed. But the Fed unilaterally decided 2%. And this has helped really kind of change people's impression of what is inflation. So now everybody's saying, it's not inflation if it's 2% or below. So you can see how that actually changes people's thinking about 3% inflation. Oh, 3%, that's nothing. That's really just 1% inflation, right? Because 2% inflation is equal to 0 because that's the target. And so even though it's moving back up to 3%, now we're acting like it's nothing. The reality, of course, is now it's like 2.6% above 0. And if you, of course, map this out over time, because it's all compounding, this leads to significant devaluations of the dollar, even at 2.5%. And so we're all acting like it's no big deal. But the fact of the matter is anybody who's actually thinking critically about how is the Fed doing here in terms of price inflation, they're not doing well at all, because back in September, when they, clearly for political reasons, right? We want to help, what's his face, Biden stay in office. We're gonna force down the interest rate and hope that we get a little stimulus. I think the people who say that was purely political are correct. But they had to justify it somehow. So they said, oh, everything's heading back to our 2% goal. They were straight up wrong. Here we are 9 months later, and it's actually going the opposite direction of the 2% goal. So that brings us to the larger issue here is, okay, so who's going to get blamed for this? Obviously not the Fed. We can't point out that the Fed's monetary inflation is producing these rising prices. So what have we settled on? Well, in the past, it was Putin's price hike. In the past, it was supply chain problems or COVID or something like that. We could never admit the real monetary source of price inflation. So now they're saying, oh, it's tariffs. If I read, dozens of articles related to tariffs, related around issues around the softening economy, it's all the fault of tariffs. So if prices are up, it's the economy reacting to tariffs. Tariffs this, tariffs that, any sort of bad economic news you see, it's tariffs. And that can only be, I think, in just the fact that people are either deliberately trying to cover for the Fed, or they're just so programmed to not think in terms of monetary inflation that it must be tariffs. What else could it be causing all of this inflation? And we, of course, published an article on this a couple of days ago saying that, no, tariffs don't cause inflation, guys, because when we're talking about real inflation, we're talking about generally increasing prices. That's kind of the common term used today. That's price inflation. But that can only be caused by monetary inflation, because if you're going to have just a general increase in price, that is all prices are going up, that can only result from where there's more money. If you have a situation like tariffs, some things are going to get more expensive. So people are going to spend more money on those things, but that leaves less money to spend on other things, and that means deflation in those other things. So you're not experiencing a general rise in prices. You're experiencing a rise in prices in some places and lowering prices in some other places. That's not the definition of price inflation that people use. So that's not even inflation by anybody's definition, really. And so that's what we're experiencing now, is you're going to see prices going up thanks to tariffs. But you're also going to see, since people aren't getting more money, all things being equal, right? Of course, there's still monetary inflation, so that has to be factored in. But it's not the tariffs that are causing any sort of general rise in prices that we might be seeing. It is the monetary inflation. So I'm alarmed when I see all of these news articles saying, "Oh, blame everything on tariffs, blame inflation on tariffs." That's just a get out of jail free card for central bankers and for people who support monetary inflation. And that's kind of our job at the Mises Institute, right? Is to combat these sorts of errors. It's misinformation. It's just simply not understanding how inflation actually happens. It's not caused by tariffs any more than inflation is caused by any other tax, right? Tariffs are just taxes. They actually can be disinflationary because they take away people's purchasing power and they worsen the economy. So that's actually going to drive prices down in many cases. So just if you look, folks, readers, if you just look at the news articles around all this stuff, you're going to see over and over again that tariffs are being blamed for basically everything. And so that just seems to be the memo that went out to the media, is blame tariffs for any bad economic news. And certainly that seems to be playing out right now.
Yeah, it was the same thing happened early, right after Liberation Day with the recessions. It was the same thing. The stock market started tanking. And so they were floating in the media that the tariffs are going to cause a recession. And it's just priming everybody. So when the inevitable recession comes after all of the, interest rate cuts, the just flooding of easy money and all the malinvestment that happened, that's going to result in a recession at some point. And you could just see them already working on blaming tariffs when tariffs cannot actually cause recessions. It's the same way they can't cause prices to rise across the entire economy. They can't cause slowdowns across the entire economy. It's a warped effect on it. And then what makes it kind of difficult for people in our camp is that we're not fans of tariffs. Basically, you have people that are arguing against tariffs using just the worst arguments that are not true at all. So you want to attack those arguments, but then that just seems to put you on the side of the people that are pro-tariff. And it's no, that tariffs are actually bad, but they're bad for different reasons. It's because it leaves the country as a whole poorer than they would be without the tariffs. All these benefits that Trump is bragging about with the tariffs, it's not true. And I think I find it kind of difficult to navigate, where should I be spending my time? What should I be prioritizing in terms of what am I attacking here? But you're right. I think if we see any big economic catastrophe of any kind in the next couple of months, or even maybe the next couple of years, tariffs are going to be the big boogeyman. And yes, I'm very anti-tariff, but we need to be prepared to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a game of it's the continuation of this blame game, right? It's kind of like follow the ball with the three moving cups, kind of depending on what is the political environment. What are you going to blame? If you're blaming Trump or you're blaming tariffs, that is a way of blaming Trump. If you're a Republican, you're going to blame Powell because you don't want to blame Trump. When Biden was in office, Elizabeth Warren was blaming Powell because you can't blame Biden. Republicans would also blame Powell because what they want to distract from is the source of a lot of these problems, which is the spending aspect of the equation. That would require members of Congress blaming Congress as itself as an institution, and most of them do not want to actually have that backed up with any votes of any sort. And so that's the problem, is that the entire economic kind of news game, if you will, is itself dictated by which political narrative that you want. And so the question of who is the scapegoat at the time is just what is the most politically advantageous angle to attack. Who is the person how do you distract blame from yourself when you're a policy dynamic, right? The Fed will blame Congress, right? Which is getting a little closer to the point, but also kind of self-serving because it's going to ignore what they're doing, right? And so that's the whole thing. So we have public policy, economic public policy, all decided by the analysis on how do I avoid taking any responsibility from myself or my institution for the sins that have been committed and are plaguing this great nation.
Well, I think also we're going to see more and more of this as the negative economic news starts to pile up. I mean, you didn't see much talk about it, about how the GDP was really lackluster in the first quarter, right? We had the third revision on the GDP, or the latest revision, and that showed further downward movement in terms of GDP. I mean, this is just the latest country to show that too. And let's look at, say, the UK, Japan, the German economies. they're all shrinking. Now, you'll remember what happened back in 2022. We kind of fudged on the definition of recession, right? We had 2 quarters in a row of declining GDP, and we all decide, well, since that's not accompanied by widespread layoffs and unemployment, it's not really a recession. So we've all been now conditioned to believe that a declining economy is not the same thing as a recession. Okay, fine. But it's still not great. And so you can say, not in recession. Okay, well, we're in whatever this is. What are we in? We're in something. It's certainly not a booming economy. What are we in? We're in an economy with a declining GDP. Okay, not recession, but declining GDP. Also with high levels of layoffs, with low levels of fires, or rather with low levels of hires, not fires. So what you're seeing is actually a flattening out in the job market. So you're not going to see huge amounts of people who are simply being locked out of the workforce. People are holding onto their jobs. Firms are unwilling to get rid of large numbers of them. But at the same time, you're seeing productivity fall. Some of that's the fault of price inflation. You're also seeing the fact that companies also aren't expanding. So what does that mean? Well, it could mean any number of things, and it could also have different things behind it, whether we're looking at the UK. And the headlines are often like this, right? The UK headline was, economy shrinks more than anticipated. You had a very similar headline for the Japanese economy too. Japanese economy shrinks more than the experts believed it would. And it's the usual thing, right? The experts never believe that the economy is ever bad or that it's ever shrinking. So now we have 2 major economies right there with a shrinking economy. The Germans just came out of 2024 with a declining economy. And we're all supposed to look at this and just think that everything is fine. And so I think as you start to see more and more of that, you're just going to see, oh, it's uncertainty caused by the tariffs. And that's the other key word. If you look at both Fed publications and media publications and anyone else who's commenting on the state of the economy, you start to see the word more and more uncertainty. It's uncertainty here. It's there's few hires because of uncertainty there. There's lower sentiment in this field because of uncertainty. Well, it's getting to the point where the word uncertainty is just code for lousy economy, or code for I feel like things are going in a wrong direction. And is it really uncertainty, or is it people starting to catch on to the fact that things just aren't looking good? Uncertainty, I guess, maximum uncertainty would imply that you have 50% chance of it going up, 50% chance of things going down. Is it really equal at this point? Are we really to believe that it's just as likely that we're going to enter a new period of expansion than we are to enter a period of stagnation or maybe even decline? It seems to me that the odds are more on the side of stagnation and decline than on the side of new economic boom. If anything, things are becoming more certain because things are looking bad. But in order to avoid using the word recession or bad news, that sort of thing, you're just going to keep seeing the word uncertainty. And that seems to be another aspect of the narrative right now, right up there with blame everything on tariffs.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't probably read quite as much financial press as you do, but whenever I do, it's like the way they use language to warp their messaging is just infuriating. And the one that you pointed out in your article from the other day was inflation expectations. They're trying to, and you're getting a little bit of this from the media. You're getting a lot of this from the Trump administration right now. Whenever with this inflation release, expectations were beat. So inflation was not quite as bad as people were expecting it to be. And the administration was trying to spin this as this big win. And like that is just so deliberately dishonest. That's like if you lost, if you're, I don't know, a football team and you lose a game, but it was closer than people thought. That's like celebrating it as if it was a win. It's like, no, you still lost. Inflation is still worse. It's just not quite as bad.
Yeah, stop picking on Vanderbilt football. Okay, Connor. I know that Auburn is sinking in over there. But of course, this is exactly the sort of language game you expect for a country whose economy is guided by the idea that 2% inflation is the definition of price stability. So like we this has been baked in the DNA for quite some time now. But to Ryan's point about the uncertainty and the 50-50 shot, I mean, I think the entire Trump economic strategy is built on the idea that we're going to be ushering in this period of growth. And I hope that happens. I do. Like, I'd much rather be pleasantly surprised than to be be pounding the table on how right I was as things decline. So that is, that was the entire concept, right? About, getting the big, beautiful bill. There's that B word again. Through on July 4th is in order to give enough time so that by the time you get voters coming out, by the midterms, that there's going to be enough of these pro-growth policies that are going to change the game and change the entire calculation. So that is literally the entire calculation, is that, we are in fact going to get that coin toss, and have it land on heads. All I know is that if things go bad, I'm just going to, my favorite scapegoat, I think I nominate for Power and Market that Bill Pulte will just be, we're just going to blame everything on him.
He'll be fine, of course. He'll still be living in a mansion.
Don't get me wrong.
Right?
He can absorb it, but
So yes, go ahead. It won't hurt him at all, and he'll be laughing at us as we're downgrading to a Honda Civic in a 1-bedroom house. So.
He'll still be in a very nice government building
with marble walls, of course.
Some beehives.
Well,
I guess the Fed, but
Well, speaking of very economically built, very, how would we call them, efficient and yet still beautiful private sector buildings, there is the Mises Institute's campus in Auburn, Alabama. And though I hear something important's going on soon at Mises U, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you gave away the game. Mises U, it's what's happening on campus. So, you spoiled the punchline there. But yes, Mises University, the best week of the year. You don't have to trust me, but that's Tom Wood's own description of it. And so, we're going to have, over 100 students from all around the world. We're going to have some South Africa, from Asia, from all around. I just hope none of them have any too spicy JD Vance memes on their phones so that they can get through border security coming in. But we're going to have a great lineup, a lot of a good mix of classic of stalwarts. People like your Joe Salerno, your David Gordons, of course, the great Tom DeLorenzo. We've got our younger faculty like Tate Figley, Patrick Newman, Jonathan Newman, and Carl Friedrich Israel, our European import coming in. And so, of course, for our members, you can watch Virtual Mises University, which is you get some slides, you get some extra things with that experience that you can find that comes with your Mises membership package. I'm sure you've gotten plenty of emails on this already, but of course, we also make our videos free at Mises on our Mises Media YouTube channel. I know Connor is going to be doing a lot of editing work with our great team, making sure that content churns out for public distribution. But I know it's so good. I mean, obviously, I'm paid to promote this, but this is really my favorite week of the year. And just the experience with the students, always great. It doesn't matter how many times I hear Joe Salerno tell the same joke about how good looking he is and how distinguished he has aged, just like Carl Menger did. Always hits every single time. But Mises University, I mean, truly is. And I think one of the coolest things is, we've had a lot of focus on all sorts of problems and people trying to solve different problems. Education has always been one of them. The Mises Institute has been providing this service for almost 40 years at this point. I mean, we have been walking the walk long before most people knew there was a problem here. And so I think this is a great example of putting into practice the ideas here. So again, I'm so excited about Mises University. If anyone out there, if you are a college-age student, definitely check it out. If you have college-age students, check it out. If you've got a rather advanced high school student, check it out next year. Don't try to get in there now. You might not. That probably won't work. We've got our meal count, already very fired in there. But definitely something everyone should check out. If not for yourself, for a loved one, or someone you would like to. I'm not. For you or a loved one. We'll leave it there. Yeah, we'll leave it there.
It's practically like going
don't
on
tell your enemies
honeymoon.
To come here. Yeah, don't tell your enemies to come here.
I wish that I had timed my wedding so that my wife and I could have gone directly to Mises U right after the wedding.
We've had a few. Well, Patrick Newman got married the weekend of a Mises U.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know if we've actually had a Mises U wedding. I know we have had some weddings at the Mises Institute. But yeah, if you're in Auburn looking for a wedding venue, then
they'll look great on Instagram. So yeah, let us know if you're planning a wedding next summer. We'll get it set up, and we'll do one of those arches and everything. It'll be great. But Connor, did you go to Mises U? Are you a Mises U grad? You're not.
No, only virtual for me, unfortunately. I wish I could have. It's really fun. It's been fun experiencing it on the staff side, but no, I never made it as a student, but I very much watched the videos. I think 2020 especially, I was like, it was during lockdown, and
Right.
I was up in New Jersey where there really was a lockdown, and I just watched, I think, every single session, at least through the first couple days. And yeah, it sort of starts off, it kind of feels like a whole curriculum. You sort of start with like the core classes, the same lectures every year, but they're really good refreshers. I look forward to it every year. And then you get into some of the more elective feeling lectures later on in the week, and those are always fun too. Some of them might be kind of timely or a little different, and yeah, it's just a good time.
Yeah, I got rejected to go into Mises U. This was 2012. I was working in Congress. I was like, we don't want these DC swamp creature. I mean, I also did like we were like beyond capacity because like that was like peak Ron Paul times. And spoiler alert, we have a very high male to female ratio, and I think we didn't have enough bathroom space to have 300 people in the building at that time. So, but yeah, I applied once and got rejected when I was working in DC.
That's a fun fact.
Cut off the
Yeah,
middle.
there's the
Ryan,
throw
right?
lore right there.
Yes, I went back in 1998. That's how old I am. And it was great. And I actually wasn't very familiar with the Mises Institute at the time. I just had an Austrian.
Was it in Auburn? That
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
By then they had definitely moved it to Auburn. Well, we had our regular headquarters and everything. The main building was already built and everything at that time. Although we still had most of the event over in the convention center at the Auburn University Hotel at the time. But yeah, I didn't know much about the Institute. This was all like brand new stuff to me. I just happened to have an Austrian professor who told me I should go. And so he helped me apply and all of that stuff. And well, it had the desired effect because it certainly like got me super interested in all of that stuff. Now I went and I got a normal job after that for a long, long time. And I was only finally recruited to the Mises Institute in 2013 or so. So 15 years or so after I went to Mises U. It's not like I was like some sort of libertarian activist or anything like that in the interim. But it certainly has come in helpful, right? Because now I know stuff about Austrian econ, but it was all touched off by Mises U, and it really does affect you if you pay attention and you're interested in the material at all. So yeah, anyone who has any interest at all in your undergrad, high-end high school, graduate student, any of that stuff, you should definitely apply for next year. And so with that, we better go ahead and wrap up this episode of Power and Market Podcast. Thank you everyone for listening. I do believe we will be back next week with another episode. We may be broadcasting from Mises U. We'll see how all that works out. We'll get it.
There might not be video next week, so it's a big week, as you can appreciate after listening to this podcast. So just bear with us next week.
We'll see if you can do without looking at us for a week. I think it'll be all right.
Half the fun.
But we'll do our best to get it figured out. So yes, we'll probably be back next week with more. So we will see you next time.